joint monitoring committees. So the data can be shared between both parties, and then discussion should be uh, uh, very transparent. And I think more or less, though we have agreements and arrangements in place, sometimes discussions are very passive. So we need to move from passive discussion to an active collective action. So there is a bit of engineering, there's a bit of diplomacy, there's a bit of navigating the bureaucracy, and then we can look for a more transparent best example, best practice on transboundary water governance between India and Bangladesh. I also
Namaste and welcome to our fourth episode of Understanding Asian Hydropolitics through 5 questions, a podcast series brought to you by the Asian Confluence. I'm Neeraj, your host, and I'm thrilled to guide you another deep dive into the critical issues Asian resource landscape. And today we are tackling India-Bangladesh water tensions, the Ganges Water Treaty, and the current hydropolitics tensions in the region. As always, we'll explore this topic through 5 engaging questions crafted to illuminate and inspire dialogue. Joining us today is Dr. Nidhi, who is a senior research fellow at the United Nations University Institute on Comparative Regional Integration Studies and an adjunct professor at McMaster University, Canada. Dr. Nidhi is a globally recognized expert in water security, transboundary governance, and environmental sustainability, with an extensive research on river basin management in South Asia and beyond. Dr. Nidhi, it's really pleasure to have you with us today.
Thank you so much. I'm so delighted to talk, to share some reflections on the topic. I've been working for more than 2 decades, and especially being an Indian, this treaty that we will be discussing today is of high relevance for the region, for the countries, and the member states sharing this large basin.
Thank you, Dr. Nidhi. To kick things off, let's look at the broader context. The Ganges Water Treaty of 1996 is a landmark in India Bangladesh relation, but it is a much part of a very larger story. So, how do you see the evolution of water sharing dynamics between India and Bangladesh, particularly in relation to the Ganges Water Treaty? Over to you.
Thank you. I think now that the treaty is almost 30 years old, it has matured. And I think I always use this case example as a success story in my teaching, in my research projects and programs. So to me, it's a relationship that is maturing, a marriage that happened that has continued and sustained. Having said that, I'll go into the nitty-gritties of some aspects that may need reflection from both states and maybe the larger observers and stakeholders in the region. One is that the challenges faced by the basin states have changed. Urbanization, industrialization, infrastructure development, water, energy, and food security needs through irrigation, hydropower production, and the impacts of climate change. The treaty, when it was signed and put into implementation, did not take into account these future trends. And I think this year 2026 may mark the time to do that reflection together by both side of stakeholders. Why? Because it's not just water that we're talking about. We are talking about shared cultures, communities that have had a collective historical past. And I think they'll be happy to sit around the table, have a dialogue, discourse out a collective action to inclusive water sharing arrangements. Because this water is not just about a resource, it's life and livelihoods for people.
So, that really sets the stage. And it's very fascinating to see how history and politics also intervene in this relationship. So, now let us explore how the modern pressures are actually shaping these dynamics. So, large scale projects like, the dams, irrigation systems, and urban growth are reshaping this Ganges basin. So, from your perspective, how have these development interventions, particularly impacted these transboundary water governance in the Ganges basin?
Well, the thing is that, first of all, the discussions around transboundary water agreements in the region are treaty, I would say, under reflective of current challenges on either sides of the border or the larger region. Uh, the we have not really formed a system where data can be shared. There could be joint monitoring committees, like many other regions or countries that present best examples. And I've lived in Canada for a large part of my life, and I can see the Great Lakes that are really huge and great in their spread have a joint monitoring committee. And it's not that it was evolved just on the just very quickly. It was a long process of negotiation, agreement, disagreement, and data is very core to building trust. And when you build trust, you build cooperation, and you move towards agreements uh, that can be agreed upon and then deployed for the benefit of all. In the context of the Ganga Treaty, I think it's time that these contemporary challenges of urbanization, infrastructure development, and maybe managing the water, energy, and food security needs of both sides of the basin, they are put in terms of what, how, when, and how things are done. For example, the interlinking project and proposal by India was very unilateral. So when basins are shared, such discussion should also be shared. Scenarios should be generated in terms of who gets what and how. And this there is aspects of science here, seasonality, for example, land use change. Then there are national security procedures and protocols that also takes a toll on how these agreements are first of all designed and then deployed. So it's a really complex system, transboundary water governance. I think the best examples of the world, and we'll come to that later, it can only be taken to the next stage through discourse and dialogue. And urbanization is, of course, both the countries are dealing with that. Irrigation, both the countries need. But the idea is that in the case of a basin structure, where upstream has a bit of, I say, hegemonic power, not necessarily they use or don't use. It depends on how the geopolitical relations are between countries and member states of that basin. They have to have a bigger heart, the upstream countries, to take care of the downstream communities, and it can be within the national jurisdiction or the regional or transboundary context. So it's like you have to play the big brother somewhere, and it can be that you might find yourself in a situation where you are a downstream country. So I think it's a sensitive, nuanced discourse that needs to be done bilaterally, but also multilaterally if other agencies can help in putting scenarios that can benefit larger communities in the region.
That's a very critical insight, and development clearly has far-reaching effects across the border, and it's a delicate balance. So now let us, try to shift our focus to the treaty itself and its place in the today's world. So the Ganges Water Treaty has been in a place for nearly 3 decades now, but the region's geopolitical and ecological landscape has evolved significantly. So, do you think that the treaty remains effective today, and what limitations have emerged over the time?
Well, let's agree to one thing. Anything that is agreed between two parties for the reason of peace, equitable distribution, and a larger cooperation is always effective. uh, but it has to live up to the current challenges. And I think sometimes the rigidity in these processes are to be looked at, and there should be flexible arrangement that takes note of externalities like climate change impacts, if prolonged. Maybe prolonged drought or drying conditions or change in rainfall pattern, especially during the dry season, and this spans from October to May. During that season, we need a lot of information, data, continuous monitoring. What do we have in the box? And we can only share when we know what we have to share. And I think building that trust over data with data sharing could be one parameter through which we can work on the effectiveness of this treaty. Then joint monitoring committees. The data can be shared between both parties, and then discussion should be uh, uh, very transparent. And I think more or less, though we have agreements and arrangements in place, sometimes discussions are very passive. So we need to move from passive discussion to an active collective action, which is not a very easy road But I think if we have to look for a larger regional stability and regional integration, if we have this regional lens now, from national lens to regional lens, because you see the case of ASEAN or Southeast Asia, they largely wear a or regional hat when they're talking about matters of trade, development, sustainability. So sometimes you see these countries shift their head from a national hat to a regional hat. I think maybe this is something that South Asia can learn. And one other thing is that there is always a fear of water scarcity. We know that the hydrological regimes have changed over the past 30 years. Things in terms of infrastructure development by a particular country upstream, or more development plans of the downstream, they are sometimes mismatched, because the resource that we are talking about is not really accounted for or not really negotiated. And especially these conflicts become, or these disagreements become more pronounced when there is a situation of scarcity, dry season in particular. So within the whole annual cycle, if we focus on dry season, which the treaty of course was focusing on, we can say that some compensation can be done in the season when we have more more basin flow. And that kind of trade-offs can be then negotiated in supporting the other country with water storage structures. So there is a bit of engineering, there's a bit of diplomacy, there's a bit of navigating the bureaucracy, and then we can look for a more transparent, best example, best practice on transboundary water governance between India and Bangladesh. I also say that on the basis of my personal experience working with IOCN as a waterhead for the GPM basin for a couple of years, and we noted that well, there is an intention to talk, but then the talk does not lead to desired outcomes, and things have changed over past. I would say larger last decade, because some data has become available through satellite monitoring, through other kind of uh, research commissions, in the sense projects that are funded either by a country or multilaterally by development agencies like ADB and so on. So things we are progressing, and I think we have to be hopeful about agreements that bring regional peace and security, because the cost of inaction that leads to conflict will be much larger than cost of action, that is peaceful negotiation of resources in a cross-border setting.
So, that's a very thought-provoking take on these treaties challenges. And as we know, the India and Bangladesh, they share 54 rivers, yet only one formal treaty exists, and it is also going to set to expire, the next year. So, how do you see the future of both countries, India and Bangladesh, water relation unfolding in this context? Because we know that the current, the government in Bangladesh is also not stable. So, how do you see this kind of a future will unfold?
Well, I always maybe we always rest our hypothesis on hope, and I think is if something has worked for 30 years, it has potential to work for the next 100 years. And I think the idea is to then see where are the blind spots in terms of what needs to be done to strengthen the objectives and the implementation strategies that are built on trust and cooperation, open dialogue, transparency in negotiations, and agreeing and maybe taking help of some neutral parties who can then be mediators to for these regions to agree. And this sort of helps. If you even take the case of two neighbors fighting, if there's a mediator or negotiator, things settle down easily. So this is a very much of I would say there's a lot of psychology here too, which we can explore on how that has a role. However, I think the treaty expiring is both a challenge given the geopolitical conditions that the region is facing, but also an opportunity. So let's look at the opportunity lens first. The opportunity lens is that the both the sides have respected the treaty, especially India has upheld the treaty for the past almost 30 years for the Faraka barrage, and has kept his promise of delivering what was agreed. So I think this says a lot. And if both the parties have managed with the both agreement and disagreement dynamics to complete the lifespan of the treaty, I can only say that this gives an example to look at other 50, the whole larger more than 50 shared river and riparian resources between two countries, to set that as an example, or maybe to have a larger regional joint monitoring system or a joint treaty that covers a larger span and scope of these water bodies that are shared between the two countries. So this could be like an umbrella treaty under which, or referring to which, the other treaties can be developed or designed and deployed. But there could be a larger regional consortium of shared water resources, which again there are examples from other parts of the world which I can share later. And another thing that I feel is that maybe pick up more easy stories, which things that can be negotiated easily, and then come to more dispute stories like the Teesta. And I think that has been hanging from 1983, so long. It's been a long time that we sit down and resolve things that are in a in a kind of a stalemate stage. So that gives a positive signal for other treaties, either in the renewal to get refined and to be agreed on mutual terms and conditions. And if I think if we show a little bit of a goodwill, it leads to a larger benefit or co-benefits to both parties. And this has to be done under a larger umbrella of hydro diplomacy, which we teach in United Nations University. We are the think tank of UN, and we teach modern diplomacy, of which hydro diplomacy and climate diplomacy are big components. And if hydro diplomacy is so core to modern diplomacy, then why not use it in some of the things that demand immediate attention? And 2026 is not far away. We are only a few months away from 2026. Is important that some points of negotiations are designed that are appealing to both parties, and start with some things that can be easily negotiated to give us a push to then resolve and dissolve conflicting issues.
So that's really a compelling, vision for what lies ahead, and it clears that innovation and cooperation will be the key. So now coming to the last question, we have seen that the cooperative hydro diplomacy is a global challenge, and some river basins have developed these creative solutions for shared water management. So could you share some examples or models from other transboundary river basin that India and Bangladesh might learn from to strengthen their cooperative hydro diplomacy?
Sure, and I think maybe starting from Asia, I do see that there is a lot of potential in the Mekong River Commission. It's not a treaty, but it's a kind of a system through which multiple parties have come together, and excluding China, but China has an observer status. At least they have outlined a common agenda for a better regional future and regional stability. So the big things that have gone into the mix of transboundary water negotiation is peace and security, and that is paramount, because the cost of maintaining peace and security for countries are huge. And if the development budget goes to peace and security, then many things suffer. So I would say keeping peace and security, regional stability is paramount to negotiating transboundary water agreements, arrangements, and formal treaties. The second example I will give is the Senegal water treaty. That's pretty new reform, and that is pretty new version of its refinement and reformed agreement, in which very difficult states like Mali, Mauritania, Senegal have come together to see that they have regional goals. They have national goals to transboundary water management, but they have regional goals. The regional goals also allows a free flow of people for economic migration or jobs, or kind of livelihood security that can be applied in the larger basin. So there is a regional goal of producing that much amount of food from the water available in the Senegal basin. So a kind of a joint regional goals. Maybe this might be a little bit too ambitious if we have to still negotiate fundamentals, but I think looking ahead is also is and looking ahead into what a regional collective future may look like. That scenario exercise can give us some of those, I would say, wishful projections. The other thing, and of course, again, a very difficult example, Nile River Basin Treaty, which has also undergone a bit of a reform in the past decade, and still is sort of in clearing some of the teething issues for its newer implementation. But largely, The historical disputes have been discussed. Some have been agreed, some have been disagreed, but eventually the member states of Nile River Basin region have agreed to move on. And I think that's where the strength of dialogue and discussion and cooperation lies. Yes, we are keeping our disagreements, we'll bring them on the table, but let's keep the larger things that we need to keep as a shared goal, which is regional peace, regional integration, larger cooperation on navigability, trade, economics, livelihood for people, income generation opportunities, fisheries, biodiversity, and there is a big basket that we have to agree on. So I think let's take things which matter to us as humans: good air, good water, good food. And then once these fundamentals are agreed, then we'll move to other things like trade, economics, development, infrastructure. Yes, they are also important, but not at the cost of fundamentals. And that's what I propagate, I teach, and I really believe in.
Those examples really show us the power of collaboration even in tough circumstances. Dr. Nidhi, you have brought such clarity to the complexities of India-Bangladesh water relations, from its legacy of the Ganges Water Treaty to the possibilities of future collaboration. Thank you so much for your insights and inspiring us today, about these issues. To our listeners, we hope this episode of Understanding Asian Hydropolitics has also sparked your curiosity. So join us next time as we continue to explore the forces, shaping Asia's resources future. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much.